الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. I'm going to start by throwing in a disclaimer. This is not supposed to be a rosy talk. People like hearing stories about how many people are becoming Muslim and how Islam is the fastest growing religion and how, we're wonderful and etc. etc. But patting ourselves on the back and telling ourselves how wonderful things are not going to solve any of our problems. Right? If you've got a troublesome child in your family, telling the whole world how wonderful your family is not going to get your child out of trouble. You understand? It's just gonna make you feel better, all right? Or it's just an act of concealment. I'm worried about what people are gonna say, so therefore I'm gonna do a bit of personal PR and marketing and tell people that my family is the best thing since sliced bread, right? So sometimes, when there are problems in society, when there's problems in the ummah, when there's problems, then those problems have to be solved. And in order to solve them, there has to be awareness of them, especially if they are widespread. And to have awareness of problems, they have to be talked about, which means conversations can sometimes be quite negative. At the reverse end, of course, there needs to be positive messages. What I mean by positive messages is not public relations messages, marketing messages, how wonderful things are, but rather positive messages that encourage people towards the Deen. That kind of positive messages. However, the reason why there's going to be some focus on the negative in this talk, followed by perhaps some solutions. So I'm going to be focusing on problems, then maybe talk a little bit about solutions. The reason is because this particular problem isn't being talked about a lot. Right? So from our point of view, my colleagues, other imams, other ulama, they're doing the positives. They're talking about the positive stuff a lot, plenty. How wonderful it's going to be in Jannah and how Islam is a great deen and how there's benefits to being Muslim. I take all of those things for granted. Everybody that's sitting here that practices the deen knows those things. And most likely, almost everyone here, and the majority of people who are watching or listening online right now, probably aren't suffering a crisis of Iman. I wouldn't guarantee it. The last time I did a talk, somebody was sitting in the talk who had left the Deen. And that's the most recent talk that I did. The last course that I taught, I had a 16-year-old sitting in there who was born and brought up a Muslim but an atheist, but was attending my course, right? Because his mum had paid for it. So I can't guarantee, but I can guarantee that the vast majority who will be watching this or listening to this will be Muslims, practicing Muslims. So why am I talking to them about these things? Well, because we are part of the solution. People who practice the deen are part of the solution, number one. Number two, people who practice the deen are of two types. Number one are those who practice the deen and know why they practice the deen, and they are educated about the deen and know why the deen is true. Right? Whether or not they've considered an alternative or not is somewhat irrelevant, meaning that if somebody is a convert and has looked into 2 or 3 different religions and has chosen Islam, then they know why they've accepted Islam. And they've considered other alternatives. Right? As opposed to somebody who is born a Muslim and is committed. They practice the deen, they pray, they avoid sins, etc. And they're committed to their self-development, to their spiritual development, to every day trying to become a better person. They're committed to striving for Jannah, but they haven't thought much about the alternative. What's really interesting about the Islamic tradition is that the ulama have discussed people like that. And I've asked them what I find an astonishing question. Is that person's Iman valid? If they haven't considered why they believe. And they eventually came to the conclusion this person's iman is valid in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they are committed. But the person who has iman and knows why they have iman, they believe Islam is true, they believe the Prophet ﷺ is a true messenger of Allah, and they know why Islam is true and why the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the true prophet of Allah. Their iman is afdal, their iman is better, it's more virtuous, right? Meaning that blind faith is valid but not a virtue. It's valid but it's not a virtue. However, one of the main lines, or the red line, is a person committed or not? So if a person only practices Islam because they were born a Muslim, but they practice, they avoid sin, then in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's valid because they are committed to Allah. The fact that their intellectual state, in terms of whether or not they know the reasons why Islam is true, puts them in the same position as a blind following Christian, is a problem, and it reduces their position, their rank, below the educated Muslim. But their iman is valid because it happens to be the truth. Because Islam, the religion they follow, happens to be the truth. But intellectually they're in the same position. They're no different to a Christian who believes in Christianity blindly. And this is why the debate started off in the first place. Ulama debated this issue because they questioned, if you're a blind Muslim, then how are you any different to the blind Christian? You guys following what I'm saying? Right. So the situation we have right now, the problem, I said I was going to talk about the problems, then I was going to talk about some solutions. Right? The problem we have at the moment is that with all of the problems that we have, right, in Muslim society, that everybody agrees with, everybody acknowledges. I was having a quick chat with one of the committee members in the office just now, and they're like, oh, you know, we're so many groups, it's confusing. Muslims are so many groups, we're so sectarian, we're so divided. That's a problem, right? We've got local problems. You know, I was just talking to somebody about Bada Estate the other day, that, you know, outside some of the buildings, there's less presence of drugs and crime. Outside other buildings, right here in this estate, outside other buildings, there's a bigger presence of drugs and crime. You know, you drive down the street and you see those thingy cylinders, those laughing gas cylinders, right? And you're thinking like, what is going on? You know, you're trying to avoid them as you drive down the street. Is that one thing is, okay, somebody's taking drugs. The other problem is nobody's ever taught them how to use a bin. No one's ever taught them how to use a bin. They just dump them anyway. It's like, come on, man, what's wrong with you? Right? Anyway, you got problems of the number of Muslims that are in prison. You know, like a disproportionately high number of young people that are in prison, or just generally the prison population is disproportionately Muslim. Last time I checked, that was years ago, it's higher now. Last time I checked, it was 12%. 12% of all people in prison were Muslims. What are we as a population? 4 or 5%, right? We're only 4 or 5% of the population, but the prison population is 12% Muslim, and now it's even higher. I don't know what the latest actual statistic is. Anybody who knows it can actually shout it out. So we got those problems, right? A masjid committee or a masjid imam might say, I only get 2 safs in Fajr. That's a problem. He might say, you know, in Dhuhr I only get a few safs, right? Look at that at the rosy end, at the positive end, and we will say, oh, but mashallah, every masjid in the area is full at Jum'ah. We can paint these pictures, right? We have the problematic end and we have the, you know, and we have the positive end. We can paint the positive pictures, right? All of these problems, you have problems with, you know, like I said, groups. Like a person comes into the Deen, tries to become practicing. Now they don't know Like the Hanafis are pulling them in one direction. The Salafis are pulling them in another direction. The Sufis are pulling them in one direction. The anti-Sufis are pulling them in another direction. You got the Tablighis in one, dragging them in one direction. The Deobandis in another direction. The Brelwis in another direction. And they're like, what? What is going on? What am I meant to do here? Right? Well, I thought Islam was the only true religion, and it was like everybody was united. This is all division, right? Another problem. These are part of the problem, but they have contributed to one more problem, which has other external issues. And that problem is people actually leaving Islam. People actually leaving Islam. All of this contributes to that. And part of the reason why people leave the Deen is because of all of this. Basically, it's because that practicing group who's supposed to hold the house together, hold the fort together, is actually, because of all of these problems, pushing inquisitive minds, usually people who are thinking about the truth, is pushing them away from the Deen, because they're thinking, what? Is this what Islam is? These kids, like, get into trouble all the time? Is this how Muslim parents bring up their children? What, these elders who can't even be nice to children, right? They look at all of this and they think, no, this can't be the true religion. This can't be the true religion. And it pushes people, Muslims, away from Islam. Then you have external problems. And the external problems are important because, in my opinion, they are a far bigger problem than the internal problems. And the internal problems have always been there. When I was growing up in Tower Hamlets, I grew up in Stepney. Right? I grew up in Stepney, just, like half a mile down the road. Yeah? Ocean Estate. And we still had problem of people getting into crime. In those days, there was problems of fights with white people was a thing, believe it or not. Once upon a time, all the fights were happening with white people. Especially when I was like 8, 9, around that age, we're talking the 80s. Yeah? Then it moved towards Muslim gangs, right? Bengali gangs fighting each other, then boys chasing girls and fighting over girls. Then then the drugs problem started, right? All of these things, and it was it was bad. I remember before I went to boarding school to study Islam, was at the age of 13. Before that, I got a taste of what gang culture was like, right? I got into a bit of a fight. I was only 12 years old, by the way, right? Not me, not this guy, as in the 12-year-old me. Don't look at me funny, yeah? So, got into a fight with somebody in Whitechapel. I'm from Stepney. In Whitechapel, right? Funny enough, after Jummah, having prayed Jummah at East London Masjid. Next thing I know, I'm being chased. I've never been involved in gangs, nothing like that. I have a small group of friends, we play football together and stuff. I'm a normal kid, right? And next thing I know, I'm being chased by these people, right? So obviously when you're being chased by a whole group of people, it's not the movies, you don't try to be too brave, you run, right? So I run and I get away with it. Next thing I know, until the day I eventually leave Tower Hamlets to go to boarding school, which is 200 miles away, right? I'm being chased by these people, at one point with a gun, with a pellet gun. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? Like, have I suddenly entered into an alternate reality? But there you go. Suddenly I had this little window into what it was like, right? Gang culture and things like that. Anything goes, knives. I mean, it wasn't a proper ballistic gun. It was a pellet gun. But the guy pulled it out in front of me like that, this close. Obviously I ran. All right? Didn't try to be a hero. I just ran up. I had a friend's house nearby and I ran up to them. But that's basically what it was like. This was, I'll tell you the exact year, right? This was 1987, 88. 1987, 88. Meaning we've always had these types of problems, but you don't see too many people my age. But first of all, not many people my age went to university. Right? Meaning education finished at 16. It was only like people who are a good 5 years younger than me, right, who are now sort of in their late 30s, that you end up with more and more people going to university and getting degrees and so on, right? So a lot of the external problems that I'm going to tell you that people face at university and at college, they aren't being encountered by people my age. So there's very few people who are now sort of grown up in in inner city Muslim areas, whether in London or Birmingham or Leicester or Blackburn or anywhere where there's a lot of Muslims congregating, Tower Hamlets, Newham, Waltham Forest, these are the three areas with the largest number of Muslims in London. Wherever they may be, people of this generation who've grown up here, I mean, I'm almost born and brought up in this country. I mean, not exactly born, I was born in Bangladesh, but I came here when I was 3. So almost born and brought up. I went to nursery, I went to Harry Roberts Nursery School over there in Stepney. So I'm almost the same. Culturally, I'm the same as somebody who's born and brought up here, right? But people who are my age, you won't find too many. Yeah, I'm sure there are some, but you won't find too many who've left the Deen. They've had their days of crime. Some of them spent years in jail, got caught with drugs, etc. Some of them became drug addicts, went to rehab, came out of it. They've had other problems. But the problem that they're unlikely to have faced is, I'm no longer a Muslim. I believe in atheism. Stuff like that. But later generations, younger people who are now in their 20s and in their 30s, you start to regularly encounter young people. Because I work in this area, you start to regularly encounter people who leave the Deen. And the question is, why does that happen? How did that start happening? Right? You've got people who are getting into crime, getting into gang culture, getting into all these other issues, all this trouble is not necessarily resulting in them leaving the Deen. In fact, people go to prison and come out practicing Muslims. Right? You've heard of that before. That happens because there's people who in those quiet moments that they find Deen. There's a really, really strong prison chaplaincy sector where ulama go into prisons and they do work and they preach and so on. And people in those moments of solitary time, of time away from home and so on, they reevaluate their lives. So what's going on that's resulting in people leaving the Deen? And here, this is for the older crowd, right? This is what we have to understand. One of the things about the 21st century is that things have changed. That one of the biggest challenges, and this is a challenge that even governments can't handle, is that things change fast. Things change fast. I may be almost born and brought up in London, almost, right? But 30 years down, my children are growing up. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old and a younger one. Culturally, where I grew up and how they're growing up is completely different. 100 years ago, the culture that a grandfather would have experienced, right, and a grandchild will experience would be exactly the same. Exactly the same, hardly any differences, right? Generally, the way they live their lives, right? The way they're educated, the way they earn their money, the cultural expressions, the way people dress, the way they talk, they don't change. And in societies, things changed, but they changed very, very slow. It took generations for changes to happen, right? Then, in Europe, they have the Enlightenment. You can read up on this stuff. I'm not going to explain these things. You have the Enlightenment. You have the Industrial Revolution. You have the whole kind of this, what is loosely called modernity. Kind of the late 19th century, early 20th century. All of this period ushers in a new era, an era of. It's called the era of rational thinking, technological, scientific invention and scientific development and technological development, and an era of rejection of everything that's old. Right? In fact, modernity. One of the meanings of modernity. I know the word modern means new, but one of the meanings of modernity as a way of life, as a cultural expression or as a political expression and so on, is the rejection of the past. Rejection of the past, meaning everything that people before thought, yeah, this is correct, this is normal, this is true, this is right. Modernity is the rejection of everything before. So it's like you're growing up in modernity. You reject everything that your grandparents had. You reject all of your grandparents' assumptions. You don't accept anything your parents have. That's modernity. Post-modernity, if you've ever heard that word, is the rejection of modernity. Right? It's just rejectionism. It's basically, there's a new culture. You know what? We don't accept anything. Everything is nonsense. Everything is nonsense. There's no truth. Everything is doubtful. Right? We don't doubt anything. You know, and they even put a name to it. Skepticism. There's something called skepticism. Doubting everything. Right? People start to doubt everything. Out of all of that comes some really influential ideas. Some really influential ideas that we breathe and live and study and learn and live by. Knowingly or unknowingly. We might know it, we might not know it, right? Secularism, separation of church and state. You know, we live that. It is now normal in Muslim society. In Muslim countries, this is now normal. Right? Keep religion and governance separate. Keep religion and keep politics separate. Right? Now, what people don't realize is part of that is also the idea that religion is for the private domain. Let society do whatever it wants. Don't regulate society. Don't create rules in society according to religion. The rules that you create in society should have nothing to do with religion. Right? There you go, secularism. What does that do in people's minds? It naturally creates a distance between life and religion. Between religion, is it relevant to me? People ask that question because they don't see it anywhere. It's been taken out. It's been taken out of cultural life. It's been taken out of political life. It's been taken, part of secularism is to take religion out of education. That's why you don't have religious schools. Religious schools are becoming less and less popular, to the extent that even if you have a Church of England school, if you go in there, if you as a Muslim go to a Church of England school, right, you're not going to see much Christianity, are you? Who goes to a Church of England school? I'm sure some of you do. There you go, right? You see much Christianity there? You see much Christianity? Why? Because of secularism. Because they're trying to conform to secularism. They're trying to be more and more secular. So people don't, in public places, in government places that are funded by government, they don't want to express religion. They don't want to appear to be religion. What does that do to people? It distances them from religion. This is all right. We're talking about the UK, right? This is exactly the same in Bangladesh. It's the same in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh was founded on several principles. One of them is secularism. Bangladesh was founded on the principles of secularism, nationalism, socialism, and democracy. Those are the principles on which Bangladesh was founded. I always say about Bangladesh that somehow, somewhere from deep in their pocket, they couldn't find Islam, right? When they founded Bangladesh. But that influences society. Yeah, I was speaking to somebody who studied in Dhaka University in the 60s, right? And he said to me, in the 60s, Dhaka University was an atheism factory. This is a university in a Muslim country, in an 85% Muslim country, in the capital of that country, and he described Dhaka University as an atheism factory. You join Dhaka University, to do a degree or do a master or something like that, you're a Muslim at one end, at the other end you come out atheist. In Bengali we call them Nastic. You come out Nastic. Why? Because there's no religion there, because half the professors are atheists, or they're communists and socialists. Communism, socialism, do they believe in God? Communists, they believe in God? No, they don't. Communists are atheists, right? Communism has a huge influence on the Bangladeshi political landscape. My point is that this isn't just happening here. This isn't just happening here, it's happening in our countries back home as well. Alright? You know, up to like 30-40% of Egyptian society is fundamentally secular. Egypt is fundamentally secular. Somewhere in the region of 15% of Saudi Arabia is atheist. These are actual statistics. Right? So, how is this happening? It's happening because it's not happening because Islam is weak, because Islam isn't the true religion of Allah. It's not happening because Muhammad ﷺ isn't the true prophet of Allah. It's happening because other ideas have become influential. And when people adopt those ideas, they're not thinking. They're not thinking. You're accepting, a young person goes to college, goes to university, learns about secularism, starts to adopt secular values, starts to adopt liberal values, liberalism, right? Liberalism as a general principle, accepted all over the West. We're in the West, we live in Europe, we live in England, right? Generally, European society, British society generally considers itself liberal, but to various degrees, to varying degrees, but even people who are conservative consider themselves to be liberal. They consider themselves to have liberal values, right? However, if you're a liberalist, right, then you are more liberal than the conservative person, right? Now, guess what kind of parties we vote for, Muslims in this country. Do we vote for conservative parties that are less liberal, or do we vote for liberal parties that are more liberal and liberalist? Who do we vote for? Who do we vote for? The liberal ones. We vote for the liberal ones. Why? Because they stand up for the rights of minorities. Because they stand up for the rights of minorities, right? And also, they're popular in the cities. They're popular in inner city areas, right? So, who is more liberal, Labour or Conservative in this country? Who's more liberal? Labour. Labour's more liberal. And Liberal Democrats are even more liberal than Labour. They're even further down the liberal spectrum. Now, what does that mean? It means that when it comes to things that are a rejection of religion, when it comes to things that we will find very, very strange based upon our religion, right? Liberals will fight for those things. They will fight for those things. Do you understand? Liberals are more likely to be atheist. Conservatives are more likely to be Christian. Right? So, but in Tower Hamlets and in Newham and in a lot of these Muslim areas in Blackburn and places like that, we have this other strange kind of hybrid, which is the Muslim liberal. We have Muslims who are liberal. What does that mean? What does that mean? So you can say, oh, he's just liberal because he votes Labour, or he's a member of the Labour Party, or he's a Labour councillor. But it can also mean, for people who are like my age or younger, it can also mean they are actually liberal up here, meaning they actually think like a liberal person. And their Islam is just their cultural identity. Their religion, they're religious, meaning they believe they're Muslim, but only culturally. They're not interested in halal and haram, or what Islam has to say, or the Islamic way of life, or the Islamic way of thinking. They're not interested in things like that. You understand? That's all. As long as you pray, you're okay. As long as you pray, you're okay. Or even that is personal. Even that's personal. For them, Islam is more about identity. They identify as Muslims. Very similar to how Jewish people, even if you can be a Jewish atheist, right? Where did I hear that? I heard that from a rabbi. I heard that from a rabbi. You can be Jewish and gay, no problem. You can be Jewish and atheist. That one I was like, really? But this was a rabbi telling me, but he was a liberal rabbi, right? So you have liberal Jews and you have conservative, more kind of orthodox conservative Jews, and they don't get along. They don't get along. But generally, as a religious community, they accept that. So next thing we're gonna have liberal imams. Hopefully not. I just would make no sense. But it can happen, and there are a few that are around, right? There are a few that are around. But what does that mean? Well, being liberal basically means that regardless of what your religion says, you will seek to be liberal, you will try to be liberal, you will try to tolerate things that are against your religion for the sake of tolerating other people, even if there is clear evidence that your religion is against that. Even if there is clear evidence that your religion is against that, you still want to tolerate it. And you will fight for your religion to be changed. Rather than you change, You will fight for your religion to be changed. You know, the Quran says a man can marry 4 times, right? A committed liberal Muslim would want that verse to be changed and to be explained differently, right? You know, if Islam has cannot accept homosexuality because the Quran criticizes those people, right? Then a liberal person, if they consider themselves to be Muslim, they will want that changed, and they'll say, well, Christianity has accepted it, why can't we? Christianity has accepted it, why can't Muslims accept it? Right? So they will argue that no, those verses have no place in the 21st century. That verse needs to be changed. Right? That's, you know, there you go. That's a liberal Muslim. Right? You know, the secular Muslim will be like, I remember once I was talking to my aunt, right? And she said to my face, in Bengali, she said, Mesa bokhle politics khorta kita lage beta. She was my aunt, my moi, right? Mesa bokhle politics khorta kita lage beta. And I was like, you're my aunt. Like, how did you become so secular? You understand what I mean? It's not. People don't say stuff like that in a vacuum. It didn't just come down to them from heaven. Suddenly they got this idea. No, these things were given to them. It was introduced to their society as part of a movement. As part of a movement. These things came into the Muslim world. Not because ulama decided secularism is a good thing. They came into the Muslim world from the West. They came from the West because Western countries, after the Industrial Revolutions, when they accelerated, when they went ahead of the Muslim world in terms of weapons manufacturing, and they became more powerful with their weaponry, they eventually the Ottoman Empire also, you know, like was on the defeated side in World War I. It weakened the Muslim Ummah, and eventually the Muslim world, almost the whole of the Muslim world, became colonized. Colonized means it was ruled by Western countries, European countries, right? It was taken over. Or you could even call it conquered by Western countries. And that's how Western ideas were also introduced over there. And as those ideas developed and evolved and changed, they also came to our countries. And Muslims started to think, how comes they became so powerful? How come they became so powerful and they managed to defeat us? We're a 1200-year-old empire. And we were amazing. We were a 1200-year-old empire. How did they manage to defeat us? Maybe they're doing something right and we're doing something wrong. So Muslims start to think, maybe we need to copy them to get our power back. But in doing so, they start copying, you know, some people basically start making some silly moves. But most importantly, psychologically, they're weak. They're thinking, obviously, like, you know, these guys have become stronger than us because of science and technology. That means we're going to have to become more, you know, like we're going to have to think in terms of science and technology. And some people thought, you can't be a rational person and believe in science if you believe in miracles, for example. If you believe a prophet can make a miracle happen, and a camel can come out of a mountain, then that's a fairy tale. That can't be true. So even Muslims started to believe that no, that stuff can't happen. We have to give it a different interpretation. Why? Because they had inferiority complex. They were suffering from inferiority complex. They felt that this stuff is what's holding us back. This stuff is what's holding us back. We can't advance in science if we hold on to stuff like that. Everything has to make sense according to science. Everything has to make sense according to, I don't know, liberal, according to modern rational thought. Not rational thought, we believe in rational thought, but kind of Western rational thought, modern rational thought. That's basically what happened to us. Our parents moved to this country, most of us, our parents moved to this country, our grandparents moved to this country. We're right at the front line. So you might not know it, but unless your parents educate you, or unless we as parents educate our children upon Islam and teach them what is the Islamic way of life. Not just teach them salah and 10 surahs and things like that, and teach them some du'as. If we don't teach them what is the Islamic way of life and how is a Muslim supposed to think, what is the Islamic way of living, what is the Islamic way of thinking, right? If we can't teach them that, then they will think like a secular liberal person. Why? Why will they think like a secular liberal person? Because that's what they're learning in school. That's what they're learning in school. It's like, hello, wake up. That's what they're learning in school. You're sending them to school every day to learn that. They're not just learning maths and English and science, right? They're also learning values, fundamental British values. You ever heard of that? David Cameron's slogan, fundamental British values? Yeah. Well, some of that is, to do with secularism and liberalism and so on. Schools pass that stuff on. Children learn that stuff. Now, as they get older, they pick it up more because they start to pick it up from their subjects. They go to college, right? And they pick sociology as a subject. So they start, who are they studying? What are all Western sciences based on? They're based on Enlightenment thinkers. They're based on modern thinkers. These are the very same people, you have a mathematician who contributes to political theory, or who contributes to economics, or who contributes to other areas. You have people who are polymaths, who are experts in different areas and spoke about different areas, and therefore, they're the very people who shape what is secular, what is liberal. All these ideas come from them. They happen to also be atheist. Sometimes they're also atheists. So they have ideas that are anti-religious. When you study something that they've said in maths, sometimes you also encounter what they've said about religion. And young people think, if such a genius person didn't accept religion, then how can religion be true? Right? If a scientist, if such a brilliant scientist rejects religion, then how can religion be true? That's how young people start to think. Now, I don't blame them. The reason why they think like that is because they don't know anything about their religion. They don't know anything. All they know is 10 surahs, 20 surahs, how to pray and how to read the Quran without understanding it. How many of you, there's loads of young people here, right? How many of you read the Quran and can understand what you're reading? How many of you? One person, mashallah. Not read it in English, by the way. Read the Quran in Arabic and understand it. One person. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many sisters are upstairs, but how many people are in here, anyway? Quite a lot. Okay? That's the problem. We don't understand what even Allah is saying. We don't understand. All right? And it's not like every child is so well educated about Islam that they're all taught the meaning of the Quran. No, nobody is. Some people even discuss, some people will be like, don't read the translation of the Quran. It's like, don't read the translation of the Quran. What, Allah revealed the Quran for it not to be understood? Is that the idea? Allah revealed the Quran so that you can just read it without understanding it. You're not meant to understand. Don't read a translation of the Quran. Don't read the English translation of the Quran or the Bengali translation of the Quran. Is that the idea? I mean, where did this come from? But this is popular. You hear it in masjids. People saying that. Don't read the translation of the Quran. All right, fine. Don't read the translation of the Quran because translations are perfect. All right, then you learn Arabic. No, I'm not going to do that either. Got no time. That's for mess ups. That's for the ulama. It's like, is this some kind of check? This chess or something? You're checkmating me. It's like there's got to be some way to understand the Quran. It's Allah's word. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it for you to understand it. How are you supposed to understand it if you don't want to learn Arabic? But then somehow there's something wrong with studying it in English or studying in Bengali or studying in Urdu. So it's crazy, like it's these bizarre ideas that have resulted in young people generally, 90%, perhaps even more, right? Only 2% of the Muslim community receives an Islamic education that involves studying Arabic. Only 2%. Of the Muslim community receives an Islamic education that involves studying Arabic, meaning being able to understand the Quran directly. And I'm telling you now, because I've been through that education, the majority of those guys can't understand the Quran in Arabic. The majority of those guys can't understand the Quran in Arabic because they just haven't studied properly. everybody doesn't get an A star, do they? Everyone in school gets an A star? No, they don't. Right? Not everybody comes away with the skills that the teachers intend to teach to the children. Right? So there you go. That's a problem. So there's nothing wrong with Islam. It's not that somehow liberal thought is superior to Islam, or secularism is superior to Islam, or atheism somehow has discovered some kind of holy grail of truth that no one else discovered before. No, we just don't know. We're ignorant. We don't know our deen. And because we don't know our deen, people who investigate become Muslim. If atheism was so true, why do people become Muslim? Because the type of the people who become Muslim, they tend to be looking for the truth, right? I have dealt with, so let me tell you some of my experiences, right? So about 2-3 years ago, I started to invite young people who are having doubts about their religion to come and talk to me, right? This started while I was at Ibrahim College. I told staff we have to have an open door policy. Anyone that has doubts about their deen, they can come through the door. You can't turn them away. You have to talk to them, you have to give them time. And I gave them time. And then eventually I left Ibrahim College to kind of focus on this type of work full time. And I've been regularly dealing with people who have doubts about their religion. You know, I'm worried that it's, you know, like, if Islam is the true religion, then why does this happen? Or if Islam is the true religion, then why this, why that? They have these types of questions, doubts, they have doubts. Or some of them, because of their doubts, have already left the religion, right? Dealing with those people, I can tell you a few patterns, a few things that I have observed that slowly now research is also finding. Number one, almost all of them, with very few exceptions, know very little about Islam. Right? Okay, they might know stuff about Islam that's to do with fiqh, like that's to do with the do's and don'ts of Islam, that's to do with Islamic law. They might have read a book on that. They might know something or other. They have no idea about why Islam is the true religion of Allah. The proofs of Islam, they don't know anything about it, because nobody has ever taught them, and they've never thought about it. Like, there was this young kid, believe it or not, in Medina, telling me why he became an atheist. Because he studied science, he's an A-level student, he's doing brilliantly in school, he's got somebody mentoring him, his science teacher's mentoring him, and because of science, he believes religion is nonsense, and science can explain everything. So I said to him, oh, wow, you know, brilliant, great. So I said, how much do you know about, a basic question, this is not rocket science, right? But I said to him, how much do you know about science? Quite a lot. I've done my A-levels, and I've done really well. Fantastic. How much do you know about Islam? Well, not that much, you know, just what my parents have taught me, blah, blah, blah. So I said, on what basis are you making the comparison between the two of them? I said, you know, smart guy, you've been talking to me all this time like you're really, really clever. If you know a lot about one thing, you know nothing about the other thing, and then you decide this one is true, this one is false. How have you made the comparison? You don't know anything about this. How can you be comparing the two? You don't know anything about it. And he said, you know what, you've got a point, that's true. I said, yeah, got a point, have I? I said, so if you really want to make a comparison, you need to have equivalent knowledge of the two things. Right? Otherwise, I actually gave him this example, otherwise your brain has this science and atheist side, and you've turned that into a heavyweight, and then you've got this flimsy little guy, Islam, in your brain, and you put them in the ring to have a fight together. It's like, hello, you need to like study the two, create a match, get them into the same weight category, know as much about science as you know about Islam, then put them in the ring. Then you can make a comparison. So people make basic mistakes like that. It doesn't matter how many A's you have in GCSE, or how many A's you have in A-level, or how many firsts you have, whatever. You probably only get one first, right, at university. But the point is, that doesn't mean people know how to think correctly. All right? Now, so there's this problem, right? So it's not because Islam has some sort of weakness. One consistent pattern, they have doubts about Islam, they don't know about Islam. Almost like 90% of the time, that's the case. Second problem, and this has actually been researched, and you can look this piece of research up at Yaqeen Institute. They did this piece of research. They looked at people who leave Islam. Why do they leave Islam? All right, and they found that, and then they ranked all of the reasons, and they made a list of all of the reasons why people leave the Deen, right? And they found that the biggest reasons why people leave the Deen, right, isn't to do with truth. It's not to do with an intellectual doubt. You understand what I mean by that, right? And the older guys do. So it's not because they have an ilmi doubt, an intellectual doubt. It's not because they think Islam isn't true, or they've even thought about that. They leave Islam because of the behavior of Muslims. They leave Islam because of the behavior of other Muslims. Hypocrisy, inconsistency in their practice. The guy is like, he'll beat up his children to go to the mosque and pray 5 times a day, but he'll lie in his business. Right? He'll lie in his business. He'll do fraud. Right? He'll backbite other people. You understand? He'll beat up his wife in front of his children. He'll do stupid things like that. But then when it comes to like, but then he'll force his children to go to the masjid. And the kids are like, is this religion? Is this Islam? You know, it confuses them, throws them off. Right? Well, that's not Islam. The point is, nobody's perfect. But young people, they want to see a good example of Islam. And they can't find it. And eventually, it starts to cause doubts inside of them. So adults, we have to do better. All right? Young people, they start to have doubts about the Deen because of how harsh practicing people are. They just don't know how to be nice. They're so judgmental. All right? They don't appreciate the fact that people have their own struggles. Right? They have no sympathy for young people's struggles. They're harsh. You go to the mosque, you go to the masjid to study, and the mesab, not a very pleasant man. I don't mean the mesab's here, yeah? I went upstairs and the kids were running around having fun. All right? My point is that generally, like there's a culture that somehow, like to be a really good teacher, Islamic teacher, and teach children Quran, you got to be really strict and stern, right? And not smile and like frown a lot. I don't know, I'm just exaggerating. But you know what I mean? So there's that tendency. Like, I've had several young people come to me and they're having doubts about Islam, and they're like, I've tried to go and talk to imams and ulama and people like that about my doubts, and they take the mick out of me. Like one of them said, like one imam said to me, "What, you think you're cleverer than Imam Abu Hanifa?" Like, what kind of an answer is that to somebody who's having doubts about religion? Like, a common response, somebody's having doubts about Deen, yeah? And they'll be like, you should be careful because you'd burn in hellfire. Is that hello? The guy might not even believe in it. Why are you threatening him with something he might not believe in it for? You have to establish his belief first. Okay, fine, I accept. People don't know how to have that conversation. Well, if you don't know how to have the conversation, don't have the conversation, refer them to somebody else. Right? And this is the problem. Parents, young people have issues and they're just shouting them down. Tafarina. They'll say tafarina, and then they'll just shout them down. This kid is going through a crisis, but parents have nothing better to say than farina, right? Stuff like that, basically. People who have doubts about religion, they're serious. It's a serious doubt, and usually it's the smarter people that have it. So this is the serious part, by the way. I don't always like having this conversation with really young kids. So my point is, we need to ease up a little bit as a community, as a society. Welcome young people regardless, and stop being judgmental and harsh. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah is gentle and He loves gentleness. In another hadith, you'll be surprised how many hadiths there are about gentleness, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Fir'aun to be gentle to Musa alayhi salam. Did He not? فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. Allah commanded the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be gentle, to be soft and gentle. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It is by the mercy of Allah that you are gentle and soft. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَظًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were harsh, If you were harsh and hard-hearted, people would have turned away from you. Right? Tell me that's exactly what happened. I'm telling you, my experience being somebody from the religious crowd, my experience of that crowd as a religious person is that is how it is. Harsh and hard-hearted, and people turn away. Right? Judgmental, talking down to people because of their own religiosity. There is a kind of latent narcissism. We have to spiritually develop ourselves to get rid of that. Just because you've grown a beard and you've started praying doesn't give you the right to judge other people, and it does not eliminate your sins. We all commit them. We all commit sins. All right? If you say something, and this is the other problem, right? We compartmentalize sin. So for compartmentalize, meaning we put sins in boxes, and we decide these ones are actually sins, but these ones, they're not a big deal. So for example, Namaz Farena, this guy doesn't pray. Sin. He's a fasiq. Is horrible to people. Is harsh and nasty to people. Right? No sin. That's okay. That's okay, right? You know, goes to masjid 5 times a day, he's an angel. But he's a narcissist, meaning he's arrogant. There's nothing wrong with him. Why? All is forgiven because he goes to the masjid 5 times a day. He's forgetting. The Prophet ﷺ says that the person who has arrogance in his heart, right? The person who has even a seed's grain, a grain's worth, a mustard seed's grain's worth of arrogance in him will not enter paradise. لا يدخل الجنة من كان في قلبه مثقال ذرة من كبر. Even a grain's worth of arrogance will not enter paradise. Alright? So it doesn't matter how many prayers, doesn't matter how many fajrs, doesn't matter how much dhikr you do, how much tilawah to do. If you're arrogant, and if it's salah and dhikr and tilawah that makes a person arrogant, then it's even worse. It's even worse. All right? And what is arrogance? Arrogance is not to be proud of yourself. Arrogance is not to be proud of others, to be proud of us as a community, to be proud of achievement. Arrogance is not to be confident. I'm going to throw this in because this is important. This is an important clarification. Arrogance is not to be confident. Arrogance is not to be strong. Right? Just like it is not weak to be humble. Arrogance is not to want to dress well. That's not arrogance. Why am I saying this? Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he said that hadith, when he said that the person who has even a grain's worth of arrogance in him will not enter paradise, the Sahaba asked him, what do you think of a person? He wants his clothes to be nice, right? He wants his shoes to be nice. The Prophet ﷺ said, no, arrogance is to belittle people and to deny truth. Arrogance is to belittle people and to deny truth. Belittling people meaning thinking less of another person. So I'm a practicing person. I think less of a less practicing person. By the Prophet's own definition, that's arrogance. That is exactly how people who don't practice the deen or haven't been able to practice the deen, that's exactly how they feel treated by people who go to the masjid. This is how they feel treated by the practicing crowd. When Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself was taught to be forgiving, forbearing, pardoning and gentle. Allah's Messenger, who's better than him? He definitely wasn't arrogant, right? But he's still being coached by Allah, coached and trained by Allah to remain gentle, to be approachable, so that people can come to you. Don't put people off. Don't put people off. If you're harsh, you're going to put people off. Allah is training him. And this is the reason. It is the attitude of us practicing Muslims. That's why I'm talking to you. Of us practicing Muslims that often puts people off, of young people, puts them off of religion. Right? And I'm not making this up. They're telling me this. Right? This is what they're saying. And then, but one good thing though is that it is quite relatively easier to reverse that. It's easy to make people understand that, look, that does not mean Islam is not true. Just because Muslims do not give a good impression, or just because Muslims do not give a good example, it does not mean Islam isn't true. And then you can then represent the Deen. But the problem with the poor guy is they've never been taught about religion. Right, next thing. What is important in our family lives? All right, so those of you who are fathers, and generally, those of you who are like my age or maybe a little bit younger, but you're fathers, right? I want to ask you this question. When you talk to your children, and I hope you do talk to your children abundantly. If you don't, fix that. That's a problem. When you talk to your children, do they get the impression from you that, let's make that question. What is the impression they get from you of what is the most important thing? What is the most important thing? Just yesterday I was having a conversation with a relative, right? And they were telling me about how every time they meet their mother, all she ever goes on about is how she should buy a house. That is the topic of every conversation. How she should buy a house. That's what I mean. That what impression do we give our children about what is important in life? As our children are growing up, what's important in life? What do we talk about? What's the impression they're getting? GCSEs, A-levels, get a degree, get a job, get a career, buy a house, have money. What's the impression we're giving? How we live our lives, what we preoccupy ourselves with, what we talk to our friends about, what impression does that give to our children? In my family, I get really concerned when the adults in the family talk about money. I get really, really concerned. Why? Because it gives impression to the children who are overhearing, and they are listening, right? And especially if your children are like 10, 11, 12 years old, children are curious about what the adults are talking about, right? And the adults are always talking about money. They're always talking about how to make more money, right? This investment scheme or cryptocurrency or something, especially like what's really annoying is when they talk about make money, and it's always some dodgy way to make money, right? It's always something dodgy, It can't, nobody has enough brains to just legitimately make money. You know what I mean? It's like it's always got to be something dodgy, right? Anyway, but that's all they're hearing about. So, brothers and sisters, remember this. That's teaching. You are teaching them. They are learning from you as you do that. They're learning from you as you do that. When all your conversations are about, money and how much money that you've saved and your basha back home and how you need to build it and how much land needs to be bought back home, or when we're gonna buy your house, or what your next car is gonna be. If all of the conversations that are witnessed at home are about that, they're learning from that. They're learning that to my parents, that's the most important thing. As opposed to, what's the alternative? The alternative is that you're talking about what it means to be a good person. You're talking about religious matters of good character, or just generally socializing. You're concerned with having a good time with your children. And you don't have to be talking about religion all the time, because that can be taxing. That can drive a kid mad. Imagine sitting your children down and giving them a lecture for an hour like this one. Kids are going to be like, Dad, enough is enough, man. Dude, let's go. You can't think that about me, yeah? I was invited to come and talk here. You know what I mean? Nobody has to stay. But sometimes parents can do that. Now, if you do that every day, every other day, oh my God, these kids, you're driving them mad. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as reported by Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, actually, let me tell it the other way. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu used to insist on giving nasiha to his followers, to his students, once a week. Like a nasiha session once a week. And they're like, you're Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, we want to learn more from you. Give us more. Right? And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu said this to him. He said, I break it up for you. I give it to you in a moderate amount, because I saw that this is what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to like doing, fearing that people will get fed up. And people will get fed up. Oh my God, the Messenger of Allah. What, you and me have more religion than the Messenger of Allah? Are Our words are more powerful than the Messenger of Allah. The Messenger of Allah is breaking it up, moderating it, right, so that people don't get bored, right? Now, so so therefore, just talking to kids, just to have rapport, just talking about, how was your day, talking about their studies, and so on. All of us are going to talk to our children about studying, right, for a long time in their lives, from the age of 7 or 8 all the way until they're into their 20s. We're going to talk about studying, but please help them develop a passion for a subject. Don't just make it about career. Because when you just make it about career and a job, you're teaching them to only care about money, number one, right? Which means they'll never learn to be passionate about anything, and they'll never learn to enjoy a subject, right? And number two, you're bringing them up to be slaves. You're bringing them up to be slaves. What kind of life is it to work for 40 years, right, in something that you don't enjoy, for no other reason than for the thing that Allah has already taken responsibility for, which is your rizq? Like, what is a more depressing thing than that? 40 years, 9 to 5, sometimes 8 to 6, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day to have a career, and you don't even enjoy it. All you get out of it is money, and guess what? You can't truly enjoy that money until you're retired at 65. And then when you're 65, you realize that you can't break out of that habit, so you have to work some more. That's depressing, man. That's depressing. When I see people like that, I think to myself, oh my God, like, I can't imagine a life like that. Honestly, actually, no, I'm not gonna say that. All right? That's just terrible. That's a terrible life. But that's what you're teaching your children if you just go on and on about a good job and career and all of that stuff. I'm not saying that's not important, but come on, man, it's like, balance it out. Balance it out. There are more important things in life, like their iman. Right? There are more important things, like being an educated Muslim. And they have time. If you don't fill up all of their time without dunyawi nattering and chattering, then there is time for them to actually study and learn from us. And if not from us, then from other good teachers. If they're not educated about the deen, it doesn't work. Okay, you can't do it. Now what do you do? Now this is a straight up solution because of the fact that we are where we are. It's happened, right? The Industrial Revolution happened, Enlightenment happened, the Scientific Revolution happened, the Technological Revolution happened, right? Colonialism happened, all this stuff happened. We are where we are, and our parents and our grandparents immigrated here, and young people are leaving the deen, all right? And okay, how bad is it? In America, Pew did a survey, and they found that 23% of born Muslims are no longer associated with Islam. 23% of born Muslims no longer associated with Islam, right? In this country, I wouldn't be surprised if it was similar. I would not be surprised, because in this country, atheism is stronger. 70% of young people in this country don't associate with religion, according to a recent survey done by St. Mary's University. That's not a joke. Our kids are going to be influenced by that stuff, right? It's becoming increasingly unpopular to be religious, right? Now, what kind of friends? Like, if our children, if we don't teach them to have religious friends, yeah? If we don't teach them that it's not cool to talk slang and trash and hang out with people who are popular for all the wrong reasons, then who are they going to make friends with? They're going to try to fit in with the popular crowd. Do you know what? Watch any TV series or even cartoons that children watch. The popular kid's always a moron, right? The popular kid is always an idiot. The popular kid is always one who's popular for something that they actually have not earned. Like, they're popular because they're good looking, or they're popular because they're physically big, or they're physically strong. Meaning, it's not something that they have acquired, they have earned. They're not studying hard, they're not intelligent, none of that stuff. My children, like, I used to have to give them anti-bullying tips. Because they used to be bullied because they used to like reading books. My eldest used to get bullied, right, by other kids in school because he used to read books all the time. So they used to call him a nerd, or whatever they call it nowadays in British schools, right? I mean, you know, you call them a nerd or something like that. And he used to struggle with that, right? And I used to have to teach him, it started when he was in primary school, I used to have to teach him what to say. And let's face it, right? If you're the kid that's a bully, and you bully the other kids that are studying, do you know what? One day you're probably going to ask that kid for a job. When you grow up, that guy is going to give you a job because you haven't studied properly, and he's a genius, right? He's brainy, he's got a big career, he's earning lots of money, probably runs his own company, and you're going to be begging him for a job one day. But today you're bullying him. You know what? If you're smart, you'll start reading books like him. The point is, this was for young people, right? Now, coming back to the adults. Right? We are where we are. This is the reality. You know, children are being taught relationships and sex education in schools now, where it's legally mandatory for them to learn about LGBT families, right? You might struggle to have that conversation with your kids. They're being taught this stuff in primary school now, right? You know, other aspects of sex education and relationships education has become mandatory. We've tried to campaign against it, it hasn't worked. All right? There are people who are cross-dressing on the streets. There's men holding each other's hands, walking around the streets, right? These things have now become public. That means we have to give our children some sort of perspective, some sort of balanced perspective, that on the one hand is going to teach them about their deen, but on the other hand is also not going to turn them into bigots who go and abuse those people. You can't say, oh, that's disgusting, because now it's a reality, it's not theoretical. They're going to go and say that to somebody who is like that. And that's also not what Islam teaches. Islam doesn't teach you to bully somebody who you don't agree with or who lives a different lifestyle. Because what have I just talked about? The whole point of it is that we're supposed to be giving a better impression of Islam. So when adults teach people, have these types of conversations with their children, it has to be done responsibly. A balanced message has to be given. This is haram according to Islam. Other people live life according to how they live. They might make their own choices, but we don't have to compromise who we are. We'll be respectable to everyone, but we don't have to agree with them. We don't have to agree with them. So we are where we are. Now, what do you do? Some specific things. This masjid has a maktab, right? You know, I love it when the committee members come and tell me we've got 400 kids, we've got this many sessions, we've got boys, girls. Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. But I can almost guarantee you that these children, through their maktab education, are not being prepared for the reality that I just described. I can guarantee it. I can guarantee it. 99.9% of maktabs, where the majority of our children, according to one organization that did a bit of research, 70% of the Muslim community's children get some sort of supplementary Islamic education, like in the masjid or something. Right? Those of you who want a reference, I was told this research by Ilm to Amal. You know the guys in Preston who developed the curriculum resources, right? Those textbooks and stuff. They do mu'amalat-based textbooks. It was actually a presentation in their office when they said that we've done some research on this. 70%, right? That sounds right to me, right? That sounds right to me. I mean, who doesn't send their children to maktab and to masjid? Everybody does, right? Now, but that's an amazing asset, and it's our elders that deserve the credit for this, because they set up the masjids and they set up this infrastructure. Most people even my age, when I was growing up, maktabs were already start happening. Right? This is a credit to our older generation, to our murabbis, right? But this education is not preparing young people, particularly the teenagers, the 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. It's not preparing them for the challenges that are out there. It's not preparing them to be able to stand up to secularism, to liberalism, to atheism, right? To scientism, the belief that science can answer everything, right? And mostly atheism is fueled by scientism. Atheism is growing mainly because of the belief that science can explain reality. Okay? It's not, do we have answers to this? Of course we do. Is there a clash between Islam and science? No, there isn't. Is there a clash between Islam and rationality? No, there isn't. But my point is, how are young people going to know about this? Only if, in an intelligent way, in a reflective way, this is an age-appropriate way. This is taught in their Islamic education. Right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, Their Islamic education must continue. But you can't ask a 15-year-old to come and attend 10 hours of maktab. That's bonkers, because he's got his GCSEs to worry about. Right? Guys in year 10, year 11, stressed about his GCSEs, and you're saying, come to 10 hours of maktab. That's why they leave. They don't leave because their parents think they shouldn't study Islam anymore. They either leave because they're bored, because they're not learning anything new anymore. They've learned everything. Everything's just the same thing again and again and again. They're bored, right? Or because it's too much. It needs to be reduced. It needs to be something that can engage them, that they won't be bored by. Right? So, we have to check. Our curriculum has to adapt. The curriculum up to 14, 15 needs to incorporate the answers. And the main answer, okay, what are those answers? And some of you are maktab teachers, your ulama and so on, right? The answers, the main thing that has to be taught, and this can be a short course, it can be taught within 6 months to young people, which is how long it takes me to teach 13 to 18-year-olds, right? They need to learn the foundations of Islam. What I mean by foundations is two things. Number one, the proofs of Islam. Why is it that we believe Islam is true? Right? And when you teach those, they have to be taught in a responsive manner. What do I mean by that? Responsive means that by the way in which those proofs are presented, they are receiving answers to scientism, answers to secularism, answers to even feminism, answers to all of the things that are going to challenge their ideas as they grow up. The way we teach the proofs of Islam will be able to respond to all of those things. Right? So that's one thing. We need to teach them the proofs of Islam in a responsive way. The second thing is we need programs that keep them in touch with people that can answer their questions. They need mentoring. Young people need mentoring, and as a society, I do a little bit of limited provision through my online provision, but I'm one person. I'm now trying to train mentors and do this on a larger scale. But I'll never be able to get the kind of scale that the maktab sector has, which is 70% of the children. Every masjid has a maktab. We need to evolve our maktabs into like I was really pleased today, actually. I spoke to the secretary here, and they said they started some sort of provision for children that were 12 and above. Fantastic, right? And a class has already started. But it needs to incorporate mentoring methods. That means it needs to be about friendly relationship building with intelligent people who can answer their problems as well as guide them in life. All right, that's extremely important. Mentoring, they have to have people that they can go to with their problems. Right? With their doubts, even with their doubts, with their concerns, with their serious questions, they need to. A doubt doesn't have to be seen as a doubt. Every doubt is fundamentally a question. Every doubt is fundamentally a question, right? You know what? A person can think in their head, Islam isn't compatible with atheism, and therefore I'm not sure about Islam anymore. However, wait, you've gone too far ahead. You can simply form that as a question and ask somebody who can answer, say, is Islam compatible with atheism? It can just be a question. You understand what I mean? Every doubt can just be a question. So these are some of the things that we have to do. And when I talk to masajid, I mention these things about maktabs and mentoring and so on, because masajid already have the means. You have the children, you have the community, you have the teachers. You have people concerned about the community, committee members. You already have the infrastructure. You need to put it to good use. Now, okay, our teachers are not sure about this stuff and so on. Well, I'm running training courses on how to have these conversations. You can take advantage of that. But do nothing, I'm sorry, that is not acceptable anymore. It's not acceptable, especially when anywhere between 15 and 20% of our children may be leaving the Deen because we haven't done enough. Okay, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Sallallahu ta'ala wa sallam ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam.